Hey everybody, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So here I have a different type of video, and I don't normally do a face-to-face video like this, but in terms of the topic of this video, I don't actually have product to show you. This will be a lot of screen recordings and referring to older videos, but the point of this is to talk to you about pens I've sold in 2023. Simone just did a very similar video, and I thought it was such a great idea to be able to do a look back on the pens that I've acquired, pens that I've sold, how I sell my pens, because I do get that question a lot. And this is a really great way to reflect on my purchasing habits over the last year. And I think this reflection will be helpful for me going into 2024 and creating what my priorities are going to be for 2024 in terms of fountain pen acquisitions. So I don't know how long this is going to be, but get ready, join me with a cup of coffee. And I also have Lucy here in my lap, so if she pops up occasionally, you know where she is. So the first thing that I want to address when it comes to selling pens is that I ask myself, and I'm looking down at my iPad, which is right here. I ask myself these 4 questions when I am looking through all of my pens. Firstly is, do I still enjoy using this pen? Is it one that I reach for often? Second, would I be sad if this pen is no longer in my collection? And I have to think, months down the line, I have to ask myself, will I be reaching for this pen? And will I be sad if it's no longer in the collection? And that answer can actually change over time. I remember, well, I'll go into it, but I remember there was one pen that I, at one point in 2023, didn't want to sell, and then towards the end of it, I did because of these questions. The third question is, do I want a different pen in place of this pen? And I will go into more detail about that when I go into the pens that I've actually sold for 2023. And then lastly, I ask myself, does this pen have sentimental value? And is that sentimental value enough for me to want to keep it? So those are the 4 questions that I ask myself when it comes to selling pens. Now, when I finally made the decision to sell pens, and actually I make this decision pretty quickly most of the time, I feel like the process for selling a pen for me is actually quicker than the process of buying a pen. But anyway, when it comes to actually selling a pen, there are a couple, well, about 3 places that I sell a pen. First is I post it on Instagram in my stories. I don't have a separate D-Stash account. I know that there are other Instagram accounts there that are just specifically for destashing. I don't have one specifically. I normally post it on my Instagram stories. Another place on Instagram is the account called Virtual Pen Show, and I'll put a screenshot of their account here. They are run by 3 people in the fountain pen community. They are not paid to do this at all. It's actually a really great resource for the fountain pen community. One of the requirements of this is that for every listing that you do put up, you are paying $3 US via their PayPal. And this just helps them to buy a coffee, just gives them a little something extra for their service. Now, when it comes to selling pens, I'm gonna go into this as well, into the next category. But when it comes to selling pens, a lot of different sellers, or a lot of people who are buying from you, want to pay as PayPal or Venmo, whichever. But for me personally, I like to sell over PayPal using goods and services, so that you as a seller and as a buyer is protected as well. So I highly recommend, if you see somebody paying with PayPal, friends and family, I always feel a little bit weary about that type of listing, but if it's a listing that's covered under goods and services, I feel a little better about that as a buyer and as a seller. Then another place that I actually sell pens is through the subreddit group Pen Swap. Fountain Pen Swap or Pen Swap. And there are specific rules for being able to post anything in here. First, you have to have had your Reddit account for, I think, a certain amount of time, but also you have to have commented and posted a certain amount of times as well. So this establishes you within that subreddit, and that way they know that this account is not just going in there to sell pens, that you are actually a part of this community. And with that subreddit group, it actually exposes you to a lot of people in the fountain pen community. I've bought a couple of pens off there and I've sold a couple of pens on there. And their main rule is that if you are selling, it has to be done by PayPal goods and services only, no other form of payment. So it protects both the seller and the buyer. And what I like about this particular process is that it is so regimented and there is a specific policy, there's a specific process. It works really, really well. So there is also, I believe, a Facebook fountain pen swap group. I haven't used that personally, but I know that there's some people who use that and are very active on that. But the main places that I sell are through Instagram, through the pen swap subreddit group, and I've also posted a few times here on YouTube. So those are the places that I sell my pens. And it has been successful for me actually so far. A lot of the times my pens sell within 2 to 3 days. Some pens for some people take a little longer. I'm grateful that I have a larger audience that sees my posts, so there is more, sorry, there is more chance that people are going to see my sales posts, so there's that as well. But that's why I recommend the accounts like Virtual Pen Show on Instagram or the Pen Swap subreddit group, because it does expose you to a lot more people that way. All right, so let's get into the pens that I've actually sold in 2023, just to do an overall roundup. If you guys remember from the beginning of 2023, my goal was to only purchase 1 pen a month. So that would have been 12 pens in all of 2023. Spoiler alert, I did not do that. And if you've been keeping up with my account, you will know that I did not keep up with that. So in all of 2023, and I am filming this on December 21st, so it could still change. The amount of pens purchased in 2023 was 31. Yeah, I have it on a spreadsheet. And then pens gifted to me, so this is either through friends or a company has gifted a pen to me. There were 8 of those, and then in terms of pens that I've sold or given away or retired, that's 24. So those are my stats going into this. So I'm going to take you through which pens I've sold in which order. I'm pulling up my spreadsheet now so that I can. Okay, so the first pen that I sold in 2023 was in January, and it was my Lamy All-Star in Cosmic, and this had an extra fine nib, a fine nib, and a 1.1 stub. And I had purchased this actually in January 31st of 2022, and I had really enjoyed being able to swap the nibs on this particular pen. What I think made it a pen that I wanted to sell was that I was at that stage of my fountain pen journey where I really enjoyed the hand-turned pens and the Yovo nibs, and this particular pen was not one I was reaching for, and I also found it quite light compared to the pens that I was reaching for and that I was preferring. And I'm not at all bothered by the triangle grip section on the Lamys at all, but I found myself saying I would rather have a different pen in my collection versus this one. So those are the reasons why I sold that particular one. And then funny enough, I ended up buying my husband a Lamy All-Star a few months later. Anyway, the next pen that I ended up actually giving away was my Angel Shop Glamorous Luxe black pen. This was one I bought as a seconds from the shop, and I really like these pens. They are a little bit narrow for me, but they're beautiful and they're at a great price point. I think they're about $20 US. So for anybody who is beginning in the fountain pen journey and doesn't want to do a ton of research and just wants to buy something pretty and that writes well, I actually recommend these. They are really beautifully made, and the nib on them is just a fine nib, but very, very smooth, and I really did enjoy it. But I found for me personally it was a little bit narrow, but otherwise there's a huge selection. I say huge the last time I checked, but Angel's been selling quite a few of these. But if you wanted to try a fountain pen that was really pretty, so if you're a planner kind of just dipping your feet into the fountain pen world, I actually do recommend these pens from the Angel Shop. But I did end up giving that one to my sister because I already had a different one, and this was more her color scheme. So the third pen that I ended up selling in 2023 was actually this Ranga Zayante Z2. This didn't actually stay in my collection for very long. I purchased it in November of 2022 and then ended up selling it in February. So it wasn't in my collection for very long. And this had a Yovo nib, and I had bought it with a Flex Fine nib as well. I had purchased an Architect Fine nib from Peyton Street Pens. I really enjoyed being able to switch the nibs around, but this particular, I guess, resin and model of pen, I started to lose the love of it. I started to lose the joy in it. I mean, it was a comfortable pen and it was beautiful, but I was also at that stage in my collection where I was thinking, I'm not going to buy a pen unless I sell one. And this was one that was on the chopping block. Gosh, I make it sound like they're on some baking show. They're on the chopping block. But really, in the end, it's not that I don't recommend the Ranga, it just wasn't for me. And that's actually the caveat that I want to make with these pens, is that just because I've sold a pen from my collection doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. It's just not for me, or it has already fulfilled that place in my collection and I've learned enough from it that I can move on from it and pass that on to someone else. The next one that I sold after the Ranga Zayante Z2 was the Benu Euphoria in Ocean Breeze. This one I had purchased in June of 2022, and it is a gorgeous pen, beautiful. And Benu makes beautiful, beautiful pens, but it's just me. I found the pen uncomfortable because the transition from the body to the step was just too much for me. I'm very, very sensitive to that. Plus, the facets along the body are very uncomfortable for the webbing in my hand. And Katie has mentioned this a couple of times where, you know, she loves her Euphoria and she loves facets like that on a pen, whereas for me personally, it just becomes very uncomfortable when it hits my hand in a certain way. So for those reasons, I ended up selling the Benu Euphoria. It's a beautiful pen, but for me, the comfort level of a pen, if it's not comfortable, and the comfort level for me is huge, huge. And it's up there with the looks of the pen. But at the end of the day, I will go for comfort over keeping a pen because it's a Benu Euphoria. So I sold that in February of 2023. Oh no, I sold it in March of 2023. And then later that same month, I also sold my Sailor Pro Gear Slim in Dragon Palace. This was my first ever Sailor, and I believe I purchased it off of eBay. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. The reasons that I ended up selling this was because I was funding a different pen, a different Sailor Pro Gear Slim. And at this time, it was also around my birthday, so it was perfect timing really. The Sailor Pro Gear Slim in Monyo Nuts became available at Goulet Pens again. So I ended up selling the Pro Gear Slim Dragon Palace to help fund the Monyo Nuts. Really, the main decision factor for selling this pen was because I wanted a different pen to replace it. I didn't need two Sailor Pro Gear Slims in the same nib size in my collection, and I preferred to have the Monyo Nuts versus the Dragon Palace. This is just me. I know there are a lot of people out there who love the Dragon Palace, and it is a beautiful pen. But if I had to choose one over the other, it was Monyo Nuts for me. So I ended up selling Dragon Palace to fund a different pen. The next pen that I ended up selling was the Pilot Prera in Ivory. And that one I had purchased in September of 2022. And I sold that in April of 2023. And this one was hard for me because I really liked the classic look of this specific prayer, the ivory color. And I also loved the clicking sound of that snap cap. And plus I love the Pilot nib. I love the Pilot steel nib. What did it for me was that where the cap hit my hand, but also how small the Pilot prayer is, led to a lot of discomfort while writing. and therefore I ended up selling it. So for me, comfort level is huge. If I'm not comfortable writing with a pen, it loses the appeal very, very quickly. After the Pilot Prera, this was a kind of catch and release type of purchase. I had found a really great deal for two Venus talismans, the Dream Bean and the Venus Hair, and the seller didn't want to split them. So I ended up buying both of the pens and selling off the Dream Bean. I bought that in March and then ended up selling the Dream Bean about a couple weeks later as soon as I received it. The one that I really wanted was the Venus Hair, but I bought the Dream Bean so that I could have the Venus Hair, which is why I ended up selling it. It wasn't one that I was planning on having in my collection, so that is why I sold the Dream Bean, and that one sold very quickly. So it was a catch and release type of thing. The next pen I sold was the Narwhal, or the Novel or Nautilus in Grand Rhapsody. And this is a beautiful pen, and it's an ebonite body, and it's a Pilot piston filler that I got from Gold Spot Pens in September of 2022. It was my first Narwhal, and I really enjoyed writing with it. It's a very good size, but I ended up selling it in April of 2023 because I think I was trying to fund a different pen. I'm looking through my spreadsheet, which is why I'm looking down. I think I ended up wanting to fund, there were a couple of pens that I wanted to fund in place of that. So really, for me, when it comes to selling a pen, it also comes down to, are there any other pens that I'm looking at to purchase? And my decision making when it comes to being able to purchase certain pens is whether or not I can sell off other pens to fund that purchase. And I feel like I'm getting into that place in my collection where there may or may not be any more pens that I want to sell, but we'll get into that towards the end here. So I did end up selling that Narwhal Nautilus. Nothing wrong with that pen. I just wanted a different pen to replace it in my collection. So that was the reason for selling it. The next one that I ended up selling was my Pens by Casey, and it was the Model 13 and the Primary Manipulation. I felt bad about selling this one just because Casey is an amazing, amazing maker, and I had purchased this pen when I just wanted all of the swirly pens, and I had come to realize that the Primary Manipulation resin really isn't for me. I think it's just it's so unpredictable if you're getting it done by a maker, and it's even really unpredictable if you're purchasing a pen sight unseen, unless that is the specific model that the maker is selling and that's the one you purchase. So I ended up selling this to somebody on, I believe, Instagram, and this person has been actually eyeing this pen since I showed it on my channel. So I'm so glad it went to somebody who appreciated it more than I did. And this is actually one of the great things about selling pens, is that if you are not gonna love it yourself, at least it's gonna go to somebody else who's going to appreciate it. And that's actually what I love about fountain pens, is that some pens, well, no, not some pens, but all pens are going to be appreciated by someone. So for me, I would rather have a pen in my collection that I use versus something that's just staying there. Yeah. The next one I ended up selling was the Twis Diamond 580 in Smoke Rose Gold, and this actually had a fine stub nib that was ground by, was it Mark Bacchus? Yes, I believe it was ground by Mark Bacchus. And I sold this because another thing is the comfort level of the pen, but I also had just lost the love of this pen, and I think I was selling this off to help fund a different pen. I'm looking at my list. This was at about the time that I had purchased a pastel Primary Manipulation and an abalone pen. So I was selling these two off to fund other pens. But if you know me or anything about my collection, my tastes change over time. So something that I may have loved at the beginning of the year may be completely different by the end of the year. gosh, I'm just checking my hair and there's like little hair sticking out. Like, look at that, look at that. Okay, anyway, the next one that I ended up selling after that Twis Diamond 580 was actually the new Talisman Venus hair. I had only purchased it in, well, really, like a couple months before that, and then I ended up selling it. I ended up selling it because, again, it was comfort level. I was finding that even the facets on the Talisman just weren't for me. And while I love the Schmidt nib because it's so smooth and so juicy, I wasn't willing to keep a pen just for that nib if the body and the comfort level were something that no longer appealed to me. So I ended up selling that. That one was very quick in and out of my collection. So the next pen that I ended up selling was one that I had purchased off of Reddit. This was from Little Pen Designs, and it was their Arcadia model in the pastel primary manipulation. When this came for sale on Reddit, I jumped on it because the pastel primary manipulation from Jonathan Brooks is such a rare blank now. He's no longer making it in the same way that he used to. So I jumped on this opportunity to be able to purchase it. But from the moment that I purchased it and from the moment that it came home, it wasn't fully the way that I wanted the pastel primary manipulation to look, if that makes sense. And the reason that I sold it at that particular time was because I had just received my pastel primary manipulation from Just Turnings, and that particular pen is exactly what I want my pastel primary manipulation to look like. So I didn't need 2 pastel primary manipulation pens, although I'm sure some of you would disagree with me. But I would rather keep the one that really, really speaks to me versus just having 2 in my collection and one is kind of like a meh, you know? So that's why I ended up selling a pastel primary manipulation. And actually the person that I sold that pastel primary manipulation to is also the same person who purchased my Pens by Casey primary manipulation. So I'm loving that they've gone to a good home. The next pen that I sold, and this is, where are we now? I think we're in July. I sold the Pilot Custom 743. This one was just purchased in April of 2023, and then I sold it May, June, July, 3 months later. I was underwhelmed by the nib. I really wanted to love this pen, but I was underwhelmed by the writing experience of that fine nib. It was a number 15 Pilot nib. So many people speak so highly of this nib, but I found myself preferring the 18 karat nib on the Pilot Vanishing Point way more than the number 15 nib on the Pilot Custom 743. And the overall look of the pen, while very classic, was just boring to, gosh, my refrigerator decides to make noises. The body itself, just to be perfectly honest, it's just a little boring. So I decided to sell that, and I believe that that one has gone to a good home as well. I'm looking down at my spreadsheet because I list the date that I sold it, as well as who I sold it to and how much I sold it for. I have a very detailed spreadsheet. And I could just hear Simona going, of course you have a Google Doc. Okay, the next pen that I ended up selling was my Platinum 3776 in the Laurel Green. I know. This is a pen that I did really, really, really want to like. But if I think about the circumstances in which I purchased this pen, I had a gift card to a specific stationery store local to me. I really wanted to purchase the Pilot E95S. They didn't have it in stock, so I ended up purchasing the Platinum 3776 with a fine nib instead, although I probably would have preferred the medium. The fine was just too toothy and too stiff for me. and it was dry. I didn't enjoy the overall writing experience. I tried so hard though to really love this pen because it's beautiful. I love the green and gold, but at the end I had to ask myself, would I rather have a different pen in this place? And the answer to that was yes. So I sold the Platinum 3776 in Laurel Green. The next pen that I ended up selling was the Pilot E. I just spoke about the Pilot E95S, but yeah, I sold the Pilot E95S as well. I was very glad to have the opportunity to be able to try it. I had purchased it with Atlas affiliate credit, and I was able to give that a try. But even trying that pen, where the clip and the body meet was at a really weird place in my hand. So not a weird place, but just rested right there on my, rested there on my hand, and it was uncomfortable, but also I found it a little bit narrow, and I didn't really enjoy that 14 karat nib. So for that reason, I sold it. I was very quick because I purchased that in April, and I think I sold it in August. That was very, very quick. Yeah. So the next pen, wow. Oh boy. The next pen that I sold was the Pelikan M605 in the black tortoise. This one was purchased in May of 2022, and this was when Pilot had come out with their Pelikan came out with their M605 limited edition or special edition for the year, and I jumped on it because I was taken by the limited edition name. And it is a very pretty pen, very, very pretty pen, but the M600 or M605 size is actually even just that bit too small for me. I ended up selling that after I had gone to the San Francisco Pen Show and tried the Pelikan M800 and really enjoyed that pen. I really enjoyed the size of that pen. So I ended up selling that M605 black tortoise shell to somebody who had tried to place an order with a different retailer and had been waiting for months, and I was so glad that I could sell it to this person because it just worked out really, really well. The next pen was something that I gifted to a very, very dear friend of mine, and I gifted this particular pen because this particular maker gifted me 2 pens. So I gifted my Zodiac Pen Co., the Virgo model, in the primary manipulation to my very, very dear friend, and I gifted it to her because I was overcome with the generosity of Bart of Zodiac Pen Co., and I felt like I needed to spread that generosity around. But also, again, saying that about the primary manipulation, it's a beautiful pen, but the resin for me isn't, I'm not into the primary manipulation anymore because it's such an unpredictable resin. You never know if you're gonna get a ton of the red or if you're gonna get a good mix of the colors and things like that. So that was one of the reasons why I gave it to my friend. The next pen that I ended up selling was my Tailored Pen Co. in the Churchill model in that Honeycomb Honey Melomel. I was sad to be selling this, but, well, I was sad to be selling this because that Honeycomb Honey Melomel is gorgeous. I absolutely love it, but I found that the pen just felt so light that it almost felt inexpensive for what I paid for it. And there was a big step from the body to the grip, and I really, really didn't enjoy that, so I ended up selling that on for those reasons. The next 2 pens that I sold were sold in October, and these pens were sold strictly to fund a different pen. I sold my Pelikan M605 in the green white stripes. I had purchased this in July of 2022, and this has a fine cursive smooth italic nib on it, ground by Dan of the nibsmith.com. Love this pen, I love this nib, but I sold it to fund a different pen. And then the other pen that I sold was also my Pelikan M400 in the white tortoiseshell. and that one was purchased in March of 2022, and I sold that because the M400, while beautiful, and this nib writes gorgeously because I also had it tuned in smooth by Kirk Spear at the San Francisco Pen Show. These two pens, fantastic writers, they're beautiful, they're very, very great quality. They are too small for me. So I sold both of these to fund the Pelikan M800 in the brown black. And I am so glad I did that, and I don't regret the sale of those two pens at all, because now I have my Pelikan M800 in the brown black. All right, I'm getting to the end here, don't worry. The next pen that I ended up selling, actually the next two pens that I ended up selling were to fund another pen. So I ended up selling my Pilot Vanishing Point in the gunmetal rhodium. I had been wanting to sell this pen for a while, actually, because I wanted it to fund a different Pilot Vanishing Point. The Vanishing Point itself, I love the pen, but I didn't really like the gunmetal rhodium. I wanted to find a different color and finish that brought me joy and that I really liked. And then came along Lau's video of his new Pilot Vanishing Point, is it 40th anniversary, 30th anniversary of Pilot in Taiwan, and it was the green matte with the gold, and I was like, that's the one. That is the Vanishing Point that I want. So I ended up selling my Pilot Vanishing Point in the gunmetal rhodium, but I also ended up selling my Narwhal Nautilus in the primary manipulation, which I got from PenChalet in January of 2023. I ended up selling both of those pens to fund the Pilot Vanishing Point in that matte green. So the main reasons for me selling off those two pens was to fund the purchase of a new pen, but also I really wanted to have a Pilot Vanishing Point in my collection, but it had to be the right one. I didn't want it to just be a gunmetal rhodium one because that just happened to be there. If I'm gonna keep a pen in my collection, it has to be one that I really, really, really love. And then let's go to the last, I guess the last two here. The second last one is a pen that I've retired. It's still in my collection, but I don't use it as much. So Simone calls it retired. It's my Angel Shop Tiffany Fountain Pen in the teal. And this was one that I purchased at the Planners Gonna Plan conference in Toronto. And I keep this in my collection because this one has sentimental value. I won't ever give this one away or sell this off, but it's not one that I reach for that often. So I no longer count it as part of my collection. And then the last pen, this one wasn't sold, it was actually given away. It was my Sailor Pro Gear in the white rose gold. I had purchased this in November of 2021, and I gifted this pen to someone. So, gosh, I'm looking through my list here. Why did I gift that pen to somebody? One, the white rose gold it's beautiful, and it's a very classic looking pen, and it's a great working pen. But in my mind, if I was gonna have a Sailor Pro Gear, I think I wanted a different color, or get a more classic one that still has that 21 karat nib, but I want that in a medium so that I can put that medium nib into a different pen with an adapter. I feel like that's a whole other thing. But really, the main reason that I sold that pen was because I wanted a different pen to replace it. I haven't chosen what that pen is going to be yet, but I do see another Sailor Pro Gear or 1911 large in my future. I just haven't chosen which one that is yet. So those are all the pens that I have sold or gifted away or retired in 2023. And my total count sold or given away or retired is 24. So if we look at my numbers, I started 2023 with 23 fountain pens. I purchased 31, I was gifted 8, and I sold or gave away or retired 24. So now I am at 38. So I only went up 13. My number only went up 13. So if we're looking at my goal of 1 pen a month, I only went over that by one. if that's how I wanted to clarify that. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for sticking with me for this long. It was actually really fun to go over all of the pens that I've sold and why, because this is helping me to look at what my priorities are going to be for 2024. So that is it for me. Thank you everyone so much for watching. If you have any questions about any of this at all, please let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching me and Lucy. She's been here this whole time. Thanks for watching and have yourselves a great day.